Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Randy, can you hear me okay at Orange County?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and Norma and Armando?
Yes, we
Yes, we're
can.
good.
Okay, and you can see up on the screen right now, I have the tech plan sections and a number 30. And that's because there are 9 sections that make up what we call the comprehensive tech plan. But in addition to the 9 sections, they are divided into 30 parts. And unfortunately, with the tech plan, it isn't a case of 27 out of 30 is passing. It's 30 out of 30. So I'm just going to quickly go through the parts of the tech plan, the sections, and then we'll go into each of those sections in a little bit more detail. And if you have any questions at all, stop me at any time. Then off we go. Uh, I was talking about the number 30 and that there are 30 different criteria for a tech plan. The comprehensive tech plan is made up of 9 sections. We're just going to go through them very briefly now and then in more detail in a little while. Section 1 is the plan duration. And for the most part, plans are 3 years in length. I think last year of the 79 plans we reviewed or had some part in, there may have been 3 or 4 that were not 3 years in length. I think there was one that was 4 years, and I think there were 2 or 3 that were 5-year plans. And I believe that the SLD, USAC, would prefer a plan no longer than 3 years. So that's our recommendation, but if somebody wanted to do one for longer than that, they're probably free to do so. Section 2, your stakeholders, description who they are, who they represent. Section 3 actually has 11 components to it. You'll have to talk about what is the current access to technology in your district, in your schools, and what's your current use of technology, how is it used. You'll want to have a little bit about the current district curriculum goals, because if you notice, in the 9 sections of the plan, we won't even be getting to hardware until section 5, because theoretically it's supposed to be the curriculum and what you want to do with the technology that's supposed to drive the technology. Section 3D would be a list of goals, measurable objectives, annual benchmarks for using the technology. Section 3E would be technology literacy. And this section, and I use the word demands, a plan that instructs students in tech literacy. Section 3F, copyright and fair use. And this section requires instruction on cyber ethics. That's the term I think a lot of people like to use. Section 3G, cyber safety, instruction on internet safety. Section 3H, equitable tech access for all students. How are you going to try your best to ensure that? And I'll just toss out a question, and every time I toss this out, I don't know that anyone really has an answer, but it's an intriguing question. If I were to ask you right now, what % of the students in your district have internet connectivity at home, could you tell me? Probably not. And that sort of ties in with equitable access, because you have to keep in mind that there are going to be a certain percent of students that don't have access to technology at home. And how are you going to deal with that and make sure that there is equitability of access?
Is there a meeting in here on the tech plan?
Yes.
Oh, okay, we're in this, we went to the Rinden Center.
Oh, no, that's tomorrow.
I know, I originally scheduled, I'm Dave D'Amico, I'm from
Hi,
Sweetwater.
Dave.
Can I bring my team in?
Bring them in.
Okay, great. Guys, here.
Section 3I, record keeping and assessment.
Sorry, we're late. I got.
That's okay.
Is this gonna work? Huh? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. So it looks like
Okay, we'll
it's gonna work
put a
okay?
couple of chairs down there.
Alright.
And I apologize for the way we're set up, but normally we'd be in that room with two screens, but there are repairs going on in there, so we can't
Oh,
use it.
okay.
But you can
We can
check out
we
the
can
screen.
circle up, so we're good.
Hi.
So we descended on you in mass.
You did. We have Imperial County and Orange County
Oh, cool.
that are participating as well.
Sorry to interrupt everybody.
Okay, we're just going through the sections of the tech plan, and there are 30 criteria. We are just talking about criterion number 10 right now. And I'm going to go over these all in detail. I'm just listing them now for everyone. Record keeping and assessment. School to home communication is an interesting one. How will the technology be used to help teachers and administrators interact with students and parents at home? And then the final part of section 3, the district and site level monitoring and evaluation. How is all of this going to take place? Who's going to be responsible for making sure that you do what you say you're going to do in your plan? So section 1 again is the duration. Section 2, you list your stakeholders. And I would strongly urge that you have 1 or 2 students participate on your tech plan committee. I know that both of my sons went to the Poway School District, and as a Poway parent, I was asked to be on the tech plan committee. And they had 2 students, a high school student and a middle school student. And the input they provided us with was incredibly invaluable. So I would suggest you take a look at getting a couple of students as part of your tech planning committee. Section 4, professional development. You're going to want to have some kind of a technology skills summary. Now, some of you who have done plans in the past might remember what we called ETP or EdTech Profile, but that no longer exists. That was shut down about 1.5 years ago. So I do have another sort of a skill summary that was developed up in the northern part of the state that I can share with you, and I'll email that to you, that you might find very useful. So you're going to want to talk about the tech skills summary of your skills of your teachers and the skills of your administrators with regard to technology use. For those of you who want to join us via GoToMeeting, here's the connection information. And you can actually then just jump in and see my screen if you want to do that.
No, you're doing a great job.
So once you have determined what the skills are of the staff, you're going to want to then talk about what will your staff development goals be. And then you're going to also discuss how are you going to monitor the professional development. So we've done the first 4 sections and more than 50% of the 30 criterion, and we haven't talked about hardware or connectivity or infrastructure yet. And again, that's because you want to make sure that you have in mind what you want the technology to do for you before you decide on what technology and connectivity you're going to want and go after. And Terry and Ranjit or Russ, you guys are all experts, so if I'm leaving anything out or if you want to jump in at any time, please feel free to do so.
Harry, you're doing a great job. Thank you. Will do.
Yeah, I paid him $20 to say that one. Thank you, Ranjit.
If there's something that we hear that should be said that you're not saying, we'll do that, but I'm kind of doubting that's going to happen.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Section 5 is infrastructure, hardware, technical support, and electronic learning resources. And what you're going
Can I
to
interrupt for a quick
Sure.
second? Is there a way to get onto the guest network here so that
Yes.
Because some people need that to
Okay.
access the document that you're referring to.
The username is small lowercase SDCOE, and the password is the capital T and then HE and then Midway, no space, capital MIDWAY,
The Midway,
the Midway.
and it's Appendix C is what I've got Appendix C open of the, because it has everything broken down by section.
Right.
Is that okay?
And we'll talk,
The password again is the Midway?
yes,
With a capital T and a capital M.
and you should be able to get in now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm glad you mentioned Appendix C because we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Appendix C is actually the rubric to which you'll refer as you're crafting your plan. Is that Sweetwater's plan? That was done, oh yeah. I remember that. Jorge Dominguez
Right.
I worked with him on that. Okay, we're on section 5 now. The first part of section 5 is existing resources. What does your district and what do your schools have now? And you probably all have some kind of an inventory of what you have. So you're going to want to include what all the schools have. Then once you've done that, the next step is what resources do you need?
Physical.
Yes, infrastructure, hardware, technical support. In fact, I tell people this is always a good way to sort of backdoor the issue of technical support. Because in most districts, you just never probably have enough technical support, but every time you go to ask for it, you're told you have plenty. But as you're crafting your tech plan, this is a good way to just say, this is the kind of technical support we have now. This is all the hardware and infrastructure they're maintaining. This is what we're saying we're going to need in the future, and because we're going to be adding to the hardware and the infrastructure and the connectivity, we're going to need some additional technical support. This is a perfect place to get that issue in front of your superintendent and probably in front of your board as well. The third part of section 5 will be the timeline. And then finally, again, monitoring. Who's going to be responsible for checking up on what it is that you say you have, what it is that you say you need? And finally, we've gone through 20 of the 30 criterion, and we haven't talked about money yet. Now we're going to talk about money. The first part of section 6, and section 6 is the funding and the budget. You want to list your established and your potential funding sources. And established could be, it could be white budget, it could be site council, it could be a grant that you have. And potential funding resources could also be a grant you might go after. You're going to want an estimate of the costs for the entire term of the plan. So in most cases, it's going to be a 3-year plan. You're going to want to list the cost for each year of the plan. And that's very, very important. So year 1 and its costs. Year 2 and its costs. Year 3 and its costs. You're also going to want to describe your district's replacement policy or your obsolescence policy. And just out of curiosity, do you all have that? Do you all have a policy like that? I'm seeing some grimacing here. And okay.
Are we following the policy is the question, right?
Well, first of all, do you even have one to follow?
We have a guideline.
You have a guideline,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very important. I can tell you right now, the readers will be looking for that. Charles?
That's not a requirement, it's just that they want to know if you have.
Well, they want to know if you have one, and if you have one, you probably want to mention it in the text of that. That would be section 6C. In other words, you just don't want to say, our district has an obsolescence replacement policy. You want to spell out what it is. And then finally, section 6D, again, the monitoring, who's going to be responsible for the budget, the implementation costs, who's going to be trying to get funding. Section 7 is actually monitoring and evaluation of the entire plan. Up until now, we've talked about monitoring and evaluation of the different sections of the plan, but there's also the entire plan. Who are the names that you're going to put down here? Who are you going to list? And I can send you samples. This is a great place for a chart. And readers love to see charts as opposed to nothing but page after page of text. So you're going to want to also have a schedule for evaluating the effect of the plan. How often are you going to be having your stakeholders take a look at your plan? How often are you going to report to the community? Reporting out to the community is important. Section 8, adult literacy provider involvement. Who do you work with regard to adult literacy? In many cases, elementary districts will work with a high school district. They'll work with a local library. But you'll want to talk about that, and it doesn't have to be in great detail. But you'll want to mention who your adult literacy providers are. Now, if for some unusual reason you don't have any relationship with an adult literacy provider, then you need to at least mention that and somehow mention who you might establish a relationship with in the future.
So if we have an adult school as part of our organization,
Then
that
you're
is our adult literacy.
right. That
Okay.
would be an adult literacy provider that you could list.
All right.
And finally, Section 9, your research-based activities. You want to summarize relevant research that supports your plan's goals. And one thing I'll mention here, and I'll mention it again as we go into greater detail on each of these sections, please try to use at least some research that comes from the 21st century. Some people chuckle when I say that, but it's amazing how many plans I see that are referring to studies from the later mid-1990s. Not to say that there isn't some good stuff out there.
Sorry, Harry, I was just going to comment that the reader, when we went through it last year, that Norma worked with, did actually cause her to go back and find some more current research.
Right. In fact, I think I know who that reader was. And then finally, criterion number 30, the final one, describe how you will use technology to extend and supplement the curriculum to deliver rigorous academic courses. In other words, maybe you're going to start using mobile devices. Maybe you're going to offer classes via video conference. And I know that there are, like out in Imperial County, for instance, and not to pick on Imperial, but they're a nice one to pick on. They have a lot of small districts. And in some of those districts, they don't offer, or they hardly offer any honors or AP classes. So they might want to be mentioning in their plan, how are we going to allow our students to take honors and AP courses? That's just one example. So those are all of the sections of the tech plan. Now I'm going to go into in just a little bit more detail. Ask questions at any time. I'd like to think of this more as a conversation than as a lecture. I mentioned that you must address all 30. And each section needs to pass or not pass on its own. Yes, sir.
Is there any way to project that on any section of that screen? Because the only one I think they're viewing that PowerPoint is us on this side, and they can't see it. I don't know if it's possible.
I don't have any way to project that now. But
Maybe you could see it? Sorry, I didn't realize that the laptop.
okay,
I apologize.
no, thanks. Okay, we've already gone through all the 9 sections and the 30 criteria. Plan duration, plans are 3 to 5 years. More than 90% of all the tech plans I've been involved with over the last 3 years have been 3 years in length.
Is a 3-year plan okay? Given, I mean, because it's changing so fast. Used to be 5 years.
Yeah, well, I think that's why the USAC frowns on a 5-year plan, because it would be so difficult to talk about what you're going to be doing 4 and 5 years from now. And even the Schools and Library Services Division, they like to see some kind of a midpoint check, even with a 3-year plan, to see how you're doing and where you're headed. But you're absolutely right. Technology is moving so rapidly that's why we just don't like to see a plan that's longer than 3 years. And when you write in your section 1, the plan duration, you would probably be writing that your plan would begin July 1st of 2014 and end June 30 of 2017. That's assuming you're going to do a 3-year plan. And right now, I believe everyone that's here, your plans will expire June 30 of 2014, which means your new plan would start July 1 of 2014.
So can I ask another question? So on the stakeholder piece, or are you going to come back and hit that more specifically?
That's coming up
Okay,
next.
great. I'll wait.
Stakeholders. Describe each group that you solicited to serve as stakeholders. I mean, you're going to have curriculum experts, you're going to have IT staff, you're going to have administrators, teachers, students, parents, community members, business members, all part of your stakeholders. Now, if for some reason, and I've never seen this, you're not able to solicit any stakeholders, then at least describe who you tried to get. But in the 3 years that I've been doing this, I've never run into a tech plan that hasn't had a significant number of stakeholders.
So can I ask, so over the last year and a half, we've had some fairly large stakeholder groups meeting around our technology implementation, especially around the one-to-one. Can we use that group? I mean, can we refer back to that group as part of the stakeholder group? 'Cause
Sure.
we haven't held any meetings yet this year.
Sure, in fact, you might want to have 1 or 2 members of that group be on your tech planning group.
They happen to be.
Then
We're good.
that's great.
Okay.
The curriculum section, description of teachers and students' access to technology tools, and that has to be separate. What technology do the teachers have access to? What technology do students have access to? And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can do it by where do they have the access? You might want to talk about computer to student ratio. Talk about where is the access? Is it in the classroom? Is it in the library? Is it in the media center? Also talk about when is the access? Before school, after school, during lunch, any other times? And what is the district's current use of hardware and software in support of teaching and learning? And I give examples here, the frequency, type of use. Like I would assume that the teachers would be having access to technology every single day. Maybe not every student has access to technology every single day. But that's something you'll explain and describe in the plan. Does your district have a technology policy use? Or a use for technology? What is the district policy or policy for use of technology? What are the curricular goals that will be supported by this tech plan? And again, you're going to continue to hear me say this, it's the curriculum that will drive the technology. It should not be the technology that will drive the curriculum. You might also refer to, in addition to, you have a tech use plan now, but what about some other guidance documents, like maybe you've had a WASC study or you have a SIP plan, or you might want to talk about API level. You want your curricular goals to be realistic, and you want them to be measurable. And there's nothing wrong. Let's say you might say that you want 75% of students to blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's probably much more realistic than saying the goal at the end of year 3 is for 100% of students to have accomplished this, whatever it might be. So realistic and measurable goals and objectives. You can also identify your goals and objectives by grade level, by subject area, by student population. They're going to want, Appendix C is going to ask for how and when your students will acquire technology skills and information literacy skills. And they're going to want those to be separate. Can somebody give me an example of a technology skill? Keyboarding. How about an information literacy skill?
Internet safety or
Internet safety.
evaluating websites for
discriminating the information in a website. You're going to want to address the appropriate and ethical use of technology. And that goes back to several years ago, Assembly Bill 307. You can call it cyber ethics. Another term that's used quite a bit is digital citizenship. And here I've just given some examples: distinguish lawful from unlawful use, ethical use of information, copyright, fair use, plagiarism. You're also going to want to describe how teachers and staff will be trained to acquire the knowledge necessary to help students with digital citizenship and cyber ethics. So it isn't just enough to say that all students will be trained in digital citizenship or cyber ethics. You're going to want to have a component in there that's going to talk about how will the teachers be trained to train the students in these areas. The next one, internet safety. And that pretty much describes itself. But again, how will the students be educated on internet safety? And how will the teachers be trained to educate the students on internet safety? And I'll just toss something out to you now in case anyone's interested. On September 20th, and Charles is familiar with this group, and I think Carmen is too. Our ETSN, our EdTech Support Network group, will be meeting. And during part of that meeting, we're going to have a demonstration by a group called Everfi that specializes in putting together classes for students on internet safety. We've also done quite a bit of work through our office with the San Diego Police Foundation, who have done school assemblies for literally tens of thousands of students in San Diego County on internet safety. So if you have any questions about digital citizenship or internet safety, I can steer you in several different directions. Equity of access for all students. I don't think Sweetwater was in here when I asked the question, I don't believe. But the question is, if I were to ask you what % of your students have internet connectivity at home, could you tell me?
We've been surveying. No, I think it's higher than that.
And I'm just tossing that question out because when you start talking about ensuring technology access for all students, it's not just at school. And you are going to have a certain % of students that still do not have internet connectivity or internet access at school. And as you get more and more to the place where teachers are going to be making online assignments for students and expecting them to submit their assignments or complete their assignments online. What about those students who don't have that access at home? How will you deal with that? And, you know, you can address students, let's say special ed students, GATE students, English language learners. And unfortunately, I mean, you can list that, yeah, there's local libraries, but then when you start talking about equity of access, it's not even close. Because for those students who have 724 at home, what about those students who don't have 724 at home and have to go to the library and maybe only get 20 minutes at a time to be on a computer to access the internet while they're at the library? So please keep that in mind when you address the issue and make it the equity of access issue part of your plan. Student record keeping. And that's probably going to talk about your student information system. How does that play into your plan? Attendance, discipline, test scores. And I've sort of highlighted here data-driven classroom instruction. How will teachers have access to data about their students that will help them as best as possible individualize instruction for those students? Communication between home and school. What might some types of communication between home and school be? Email.
Communications about grades, communications about school-wide communications to parents.
Do you have any systems right now, automatic phone calling systems? Definitely, you might want to consider that. I'm just trying to think of, websites.
Internet services, yeah. Jupyter, Jupyter Grade.
So be sure to mention all of those. And this is two-way communication. So you might also be thinking about cell phones as well. And then finally, what process is going to be used to monitor all of these criteria we just went through? And what I've done here, who is responsible? You're going to want to mention names and positions. It isn't just enough to say that this will be monitored. You want to be very specific as to who will play that role.
Can you just use a committee, or do you have to actually have?
You can say a committee. You can say a committee. It will be the responsibility of this committee. Maybe the committee is headed up by, and you mention that person, or maybe it's co-chaired by, and mention them as well. Because otherwise, if you're vague, the reader is really going to wonder, well, is it really part of the plan? Or are they just paying lip service to it? So who's responsible? What is expected? Something that's very important is how often will data be gathered? And what data will you be gathering? Section 4, professional development. You want a summary of the teacher and administrator, and this is separate. Don't just lump them into one and say staff. You want a summary of your teacher skills. You want a summary of your administrator skills with regard to technology. And then and only then, once you have a summary of the skills, can you talk about your plan for professional development. Because I've seen plans, and I did see a few last year, where there was an elaborate plan for professional development, but there was no mention made of what skills they were trying to hone in their administrators or in their teachers, or what their needs were based on some kind of a survey, whether it's a formal survey or whether it's a self-assessment kind of survey. So make sure that you talk about the skills, the summary of the skills that was done first, then go into the professional development you're going to provide. Your goals and objectives. And again, you want to talk about, you want them to be realistic. Maybe you're never going to get 100% of the staff to where you'd like them to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's much more realistic than saying, oh, 100%. Saw a plan last year, in fact, saw a couple of them, where by the end of year one, they already had 100% of their staff expert in all of these areas. And so I made a note, and I called up to my counterpart in that region, and I said, are they really going to? No, I don't know where that came from. And, even by year three, you're not going to hit 100%. And please keep in mind, there's nothing wrong with that. It's being realistic. Something I do want to mention, Los Angeles County Office of Education has an online tech plan builder that you might want to take a look at. And I've got, if you just go to LACO Tech Plan Builder, it's something worth taking a look at. And what I think is just one of the many things I think is very good about that is it uses the exact wording from Appendix C. And I can tell you right now, readers go crazy if they have to look through an entire plan to find something. That's why if I have any advice to give you, and if any of the readers were here, the advice would be use the wording from Appendix C at the top of whatever section you're writing. Don't try to paraphrase. Use that wording and then write the section under it. It makes it much easier for the reader. I just mentioned here, let me just do this for a moment. Anybody here familiar with DataQuest or EdData? Okay, then I won't need to talk about that. And again, for the monitoring of the professional development component, who is responsible, what is expected, how often will that monitoring take place, and what is it that you're going to gather to say that you have monitored the professional development. Section 5, hardware, infrastructure, connectivity. The first thing they're going to ask you to do is describe the existing hardware, your internet accesses, electronic learning resources, tech support already in the district. And again, don't forget, backdoor your way in with regard to the tech support. Because it's just unrealistic to talk in terms of how much technology and infrastructure you're going to be adding over 3 years, and yet you're not going to add a single position to support all of that additional technology and infrastructure. You want to talk about, and I think you probably have an inventory of your equipment. You want to describe your network, your internet access, capacities. I mean, you can organize it by grade level, you could do it by school, you could do it by curriculum area, that's up to you. And be sure, anybody in here that deals with E-rate? Okay. Be sure that you include all the items that you have from your E-rate form 470. Whatever you're putting in there, make sure that's part of your plan. Because if it isn't, somebody from the SLD is going to take a look at that and go, huh, they asked for this money for this equipment and for this infrastructure, but they don't mention it in their plan. So please be sure that you do that. Then once you've mentioned what you have, the next part of infrastructure is, what do you need? What are you going to go after?
And this may not even be new or upgrades, it may just be perpetuating your existing status quo, especially if you recently upgraded.
Well, you'd want to mention that you recently upgraded, but it's still, I mean, even if you're doing a 3-year plan, it would be hard to imagine that you still wouldn't be adding to what you just got 3 years from now. But, maybe that's a possibility. And if that's the case, then talk about it in your plan. But I'd like to drop by 3 years from now and see. And maybe a lot more mobile devices.
But that wouldn't be infrastructure, would it?
No, but it would be, well, you might consider it hardware. So you want to list what items are you going to be acquiring, how much is it going to cost, and when are you going to do that during the 3-year period of your plan. And again, the timeline. And make sure your timeline includes all the years of your plan.
You mean the current plan, not or the plan we're working on, not previous plans?
Correct. And when you talk about obsolete equipment, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's stuff you throw away. You might, another word, maybe not a better word, but another word you might also use would be, how will you repurpose equipment? Like maybe you've got some computers that were used in the lab, and now they're getting older, so maybe 3 or 4 of those from the lab go into a classroom, or vice versa. But talk about repurposing equipment as well. And here again, the process, how are you going to monitor? Just remember these words, that small words: who, what, how often. And here we are finally, 2/3 of the way through, we're finally going to start talking about money. And yet it's amazing how many districts, the first thing they do is they're going out and they're buying equipment. And they haven't come up with a plan for how they're going to use it or what they're going to use it for. So, for funding and budget, first of all, list established funding. And give me some examples of established funding.
Russ says E-rate.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Russ. That's a no-brainer. And in fact, while we have Russ would probably be considered one of the state's E-rate gurus and E-rate experts. He does a lot of work with the California Department of Ed and the K-12 high-speed network with regard to E-rate. Russ, do you think there's even a snowball's chance, and you know what, that they're going to up that $2.4 billion for E-rate now? Do you think that's going to happen?
I think there's a good chance. I mean, this is the best opportunity I've seen in the life of E-rate, where everyone's making comments. There's a lot of political pressure, and so I don't know exactly how much they'll increase it by, but I would hope it'd be by $1 billion to 3 point something. So yeah, I mean, I bet Terry's paycheck on it, but not mine.
Is that statewide or?
Nationwide. And Russ is absolutely right. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with E-rate. Because this year, and Russ, you have to help me with the numbers, 2.4 billion. How much was actually was given out, but how much was requested?
It was the total request with all the categories is 4.98 billion, but priority one alone was almost 2.8 billion. So there was like a deficit of $400 or $500 million.
Just for priority one.
Yeah, yeah. CTF is another discount telecommunications too for your tech plan.
And you know what? It would definitely be revolutionary if they were to really up E-rate. And just for a 30-second break, I'll give you a trivia question. There's a big anniversary coming up on October 4th. And when we talk about revolutionary, something that spurred a lot of stuff to happen, can anybody tell me what it might be? October 4th.
Seabeds are due.
Not quite. If I gave you the year, that might give it away. So, I'll give you the year. It was October 4th, 1957. Yeah, everybody's looking around saying, hey, we weren't around
That
then.
was the beginning of
The
space
first
race,
moon, the first space shot, right? The
Sputnik.
first rocket
Sputnik,
into
right?
space.
It was the beginning
Oh.
of the space race. And that changed a lot of things in this country with regard to funding, with regard to education. And imagine what would happen if funding were significantly raised for internet connectivity. And the number of people with internet, the percent of people with internet connectivity just skyrocketed. Think what that might do for this country as well. So, your established funding, E-rate is one. Your white budget, your general budget might be another. Site council, PTA. Maybe you got a grant, or you're thinking of applying for one. That would be your established. And then what would be some potential funding resources? E-rate could be potential as well because there's no guarantee you're going to get it. Grants.
What about the new Common Core rollout? I mean, that's the money coming down to roll out the Common Core.
That's, yeah, you could.
I mean, it's a one-time funding source. But
It's a one-time funding source, but you could mention it because each district is probably going to allocate their Common Core funds differently.
So we need to upgrade technology, for example, high schools to be SBAC ready. So that might be a way to do that.
That could very well be. K-12 voucher. I smile every time I hear that because at least for the last 2 years, we've been talking about the release of the second cypre of funding in the K-12 voucher. And my guess is it could be statewide another $200 to $240 million that could be being held. But I'm so glad you mentioned K-12 voucher because to be eligible for K-12 voucher, what do you need? A state-approved tech plan. And then also, you might even want to talk about identification of future funding. Something you haven't thought of. Maybe there's different kinds of fundraisers, different kinds of sponsors, organizations that could sponsor your district or groups within your district. And then you're going to estimate implementation costs for each year of your plan. So year one, what are the costs going to be? And you know what a budget sheet looks like, your 1,000 line, your 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 lines. I would suggest doing it that way. And then year one, year two, year three. We've already talked about your obsolescence policy or your replacement policy. And you might even, I think it would be legitimate to toss in there how you might repurpose equipment. And who is in charge of this policy? Is it the head of your IT? Is it an assistant superintendent? Is it someone in your business department? And there's no right answer, but you definitely want to mention who that person will be. And then describe the process to monitor the funding. And here we are again. Who, what, how often? And then monitoring and evaluation. Up until now, we've talked about each of the sections. Now we're going to talk about the whole ball of wax. Who's going to monitor and evaluate the entire plan? Are you doing what you said you were going to do? How often will the monitoring occur? Now, I do know also that the readers, rather than just having you write, oh, it's going to occur annually, they would almost rather prefer to hear something like, every June we will do it, or maybe it's going to happen every September. But be as specific as you can be, because annually is pretty vague. If your tech plan is to be used for an E-rate plan, be sure to specify a major review at least every 3 years. And I'm saying that for those districts, and I don't think we have anybody here that's going to be looking at more than a 3-year plan, but for those who are doing 4 or 5-year plans, specify a review in there no later than after the 3rd year, and probably sooner than that. And then how is your monitoring and evaluation information going to be used? Who are you going to report it to? Obviously, your tech plan committee, obviously your stakeholders. You're probably going to report it to the board. You might report it to your parents at a back-to-school night. But the more word you can get out about the plan, chances are the greater support you're going to have for it. And the easier it might be to get additional funding when you request it. And then I put in here feedback loop, because as you monitor and evaluate, you're actually going to be creating a feedback loop that will allow you to update your plan and maybe include things in it you hadn't thought of. Adult literacy, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and I doubt that we're going to have anyone here that isn't going to be able to come up with whether it's a library or an ROP program of some kind. or for elementary districts, your high school districts, or you're going to have an adult ed program that stresses literacy. Research. And as you can see, use 21st century research if at all possible. And you've probably got some really good examples of that in your existing plan right now. And while I better say now because I'll forget it. While I'm thinking about it, you don't have to rewrite this plan from scratch. Look through it and see what you have in there that maybe you're still doing. That could be part of your new plan. And then the final part, deliverance of rigorous academic courses. What are some of the current district course offerings supported by technology? And then I just threw in here distance learning, voice over IP, video on demand, video conferencing, BYOD. How are you going to deal with that in your district? And then I think I've already sent this entire, in fact, I'm trying to think who I might have sent it to in Sweetwater.
Was it? I don't know, maybe not.
No, it was Rubino. Is that the name? I'm trying to think of. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name.
What was it that you sent?
I sent several of these handouts. I sent this entire presentation.
Me.
Did I send that to you?
Uh-huh. Because I shared it with everyone in the team.
Okay,
You and I have been in communication about this meeting.
okay. But there was somebody else I sent it to also. But anyway, I sent it out to, sorry,
I know that's, you said somebody else,
but I went through every district and charter school whose tech plan was due to expire June 30th, 2014. And I sent them a document letting them know that was happening, and then I sent them a whole bunch of handouts. Now, I'll just take a moment and talk about this, but I think that everyone's probably going to be doing the comprehensive tech plan, the full 9-section plan. But there's also what's called a standard plan, a standard or an E-rate plan. And it basically consists of what you see here. Clear goals and strategy for telecommunications use, a professional development strategy, an assessment of your telecommunications services, hardware and software, and an evaluation process that allows monitoring of progress and making mid-year corrections. Now, some people might think, oh, that's only 4. I'm going to do an E-rate plan instead. I think an E-rate plan is much more difficult because it isn't as specific. It doesn't have as specific a rubric as your comprehensive plan has. I do have this down here in red. As of fiscal year 2011, they no longer require a budget for an E-rate plan. They used to, but they don't any longer.
Is the E-rate plan required for priority 1 and priority 2?
Beginning in 2011, a tech plan is required only for priority 2 services. And that would be internal connections and basic maintenance of internal connections. Length of an E-rate plan, not more than 3 years. And I think you want to keep in mind a tech plan should not be a static document. It's something that considered evolutionary in nature. And in some districts, it might even be revolutionary. A tech plan must be written and on file. But notice, not approved. Doesn't have to be approved yet. And I'm glad Russ is back. Russ, I want you to please listen to what I'm saying here, and if I've made a mistake, please let me know. Tech plan must be written and on file before Forms 470 or 471 are filed. But you don't have to have the plan approved before they're filed. Something else
It
I
has to
would...
be, I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to say, it has to be before the 470, not the 471. So,
That it has to be approved, correct?
no, it has to be written and documented by an email or something, but not before the 471, but it needs to be done before the 470 only.
Okay, and it's a good idea to email a copy of a draft of your plan to yourself as a timestamp. And it might also help you in case of an audit. If somebody says, well, you really didn't have a plan when you filed.
Yeah, preferably have like an assistant soup that kind of oversees and written before Form 470 was due to be filed, and then archive that email. That way you kind of document it, and then like you're saying, have it sent to yourself, then you have it documented both ways. But yeah, you're right. You don't need to have it approved until after, before start of service, so by June 30th. And I think the tech plan approvers love it when you come in on June 25th and ask for it to be approved by the 1st of July.
I'll tell you, they loved that last year. That was brutal. We had some
Yeah.
districts that didn't submit their plans until June 25th. And the poor readers weren't happy campers. And then as Russ said, the tech plan has to be approved before the start of service or the filing of Form 486, whichever comes first. Is that right?
Yeah, by July 1st or by the time you do your 486, whichever
Okay.
comes first.
And then here's my contact information. Okay. These people need to...
Not that I can think of. Our experience, Harry, was that, so writing for a county office instead of at a district level, the programs we were working with were our court and community schools and our special education populations. And I think Norma would agree that the toughest part was getting that active engagement from the people that you need off the curricular side. And so I love seeing Sweetwater's team there. You probably have a good number of stakeholders that are going to be engaged in it. And so that would make it, I think, a really positive experience.
You know, Terry, that's an interesting comment you made, that getting the curricular people involved was really difficult. I've also heard some people say that getting the budget people involved was a challenge.
In our case, because those programs had cut so much staff, the fiscal managers did have to step up and help us, and they probably engaged to a little better degree to give the budget information than we got from the people that are actually working in instructional programs.
One other...
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So how many of you guys are using surveys to So, you know, you have your stakeholder group, but if you want to get more data from your broader stakeholders, are you surveying specific groups and then using that data to help kind of your core group develop their plan? Is anybody doing that?
Terry, I think I'm familiar with the Imperial County plans, and I don't recall any from there. Ranjit, are you aware of any kinds of surveys that some of your districts might have used in Orange County?
Was that specific to feedback from stakeholders or in general?
Both.
So as far as I know, given that EdTech profile no longer exists, we've had districts create or modify what the EdTech profile used to be, and respond to assessing the proficiency skill levels of administrators and teachers. Now, as far as stakeholders go, yes, they have created some basic, in the larger districts, a survey to assess and monitor the feedback loop when they respond to Section 7 in monitoring of the whole plan, so that there is evidence that they have data, and then they can act on the data so that they can show that they responded effectively.
How about though using that same idea with survey data to support or validate or kind of document the rationale for the plan?
We haven't had that, but I think it sounds like it would be a good idea. Yeah.
I guess you don't want to be put in a position where you're pointing to data or you just throw numbers out and somebody says, well, where did they come from? Where did you get this information? So make sure that you keep track of the sources of your data. I just threw this up here. Are most of you familiar with this website, the K-12 voucher website? Basically what we have here, we have every school district or charter school in the state that is eligible for K-12 voucher dollars is listed on here. And let's see. We'll go to, for instance, Sweetwater. Sweetwater still has a balance of about $107,000 of software voucher dollars. General purpose. And that's probably more often the case than not, that there'll be remaining balances in software voucher than there will be in general purpose voucher dollars.
And sunset on this allocation is
Sunset on the allocation has been extended until September 25th, 2014. It was set to expire in 3 weeks, actually 3 weeks from today, September 25th. But it was extended because they haven't released all that money they're still sitting on. And just to give you an idea of how important the tech plans are, This last year, we were involved with 79 tech plans. That were read and approved. I'm trying to remember the numbers. It was 3 from Imperial County. I can't quite remember, but it was a total of 79. And what I then went and did, I went back to this K-12 voucher website, and I put down the amount of voucher dollars that every one of those 79 districts or charters were eligible for or had received in the past. And the total amount was over $16 million. So tech plans are very, very important. And we really take them seriously, and we really try to provide as much assistance as we can. So if you have any questions at all, call me. I'll help any way that I can. The only thing that I'm not allowed to do is I'm not allowed to write your plan.
Not even for extra money?
Not even for extra money.
I ask.
Any questions? Now, as we sit here, I will make you a guarantee. The California Department of Ed hasn't come out with plan submission cycle dates yet, but I'm guessing, they're probably going to be looking at October and maybe November, and then January and probably March. But as we sit here, I can look you right in the eye and say, and I hope I'm wrong, that you guys I'll be hearing from you. I won't be hearing from you until March. So I hope that isn't the case. Now, I know that's not the case in Orange County because Ranjit beats his people.
Oh, Harry, don't give out my secrets.
But please don't wait until the last minute, because I think this year we're going to have fewer tech plan readers than we've ever had, which means there's going to be a greater load on fewer people.
Mm-hmm.
So try and get this accomplished as soon as you possibly can. And thank you all for coming.
I sent,
Thank you, Harry. We appreciate you extending us the opportunity to participate with you.
Oh, thanks for being there. And do you know if anyone's coming tomorrow, Terry?
We only heard from one other district, and he was planning to stream today, but I never saw him. So we might have a streamer from Mulberry.
Okay. And Rajit, do you have people coming tomorrow?
Yes, we'll have about 4 people.
Okay.
Thanks again, Harry. Appreciate it.
Well, you're
Question,
welcome.
Harry. One question here. Are you providing any deadlines for submission of the sections for districts or no?
No, the only thing I'll say is before we assign a groomer to help you with your plan, I need a draft of the first 4 sections. Sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once I have that, or once you have that, and you can get that to me, then I will within 24 hours of when I get it, I will assign a groomer to you. And we have some really good groomers.
It's been written.
I think you said this, Harry, but that date, those first 4 sections, that's the same draft that needs to be in place before you push your button on your Form 470.
Correct.
So you can't wait till the fall, till the spring on that. That's got to be this fall. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you all.